Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be my August TBR. Now I'm not gonna lie, my August TBR is long and very confused. So let's talk about that a little bit before going into further detail. So for the month of August, I truly cannot pinpoint exactly what it is I feel like reading. So I kind of have a mishmash of things. I have some summer leaning books that I have remnant from my summer TBR. I also have some more fall leaning books that I've snuck onto this TBR too. It's kind of a mix of different vibes, different settings, just depending on what it is I ultimately feel like reading. I also have quite a few books on my TBR, which I think is a little ambitious because most of this month I'm actually going to be out of town because I'm getting married this month, which is, very exciting. With that in mind, and given the fact I'm going to be traveling, I feel like I'm either going to read a lot or like not at all. So we're just going to see how the cards fall at the end of the month. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the books I hope to read for the month of August. The first book that is on my list I feel like is a heartwarming and charming read, perhaps a good book to bring along on an airplane somewhere, and that is A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I fell in love with Becky Chambers' short story books that I read earlier this year that I definitely wanted to check out her like longer full-length novel stories too. This is a sci-fi story that appears to be full of found family. In it, we're introduced to our main character, Rosemary, and when she joins the crew of wayfarers, she really isn't expecting much. The ship itself is a patchwork of like repairs, and she really is just looking for a place she can call home and to be given the opportunity to travel all across the galaxy, which is her dream. As she feels like she's finally getting settled in amongst the crew, which is comprised of some very interesting individuals, things are kind of thrown upside down when the crew is offered a very unexpected opportunity, and that is to explore like black holes and see where they go. This is a very lucrative job, but also one that is much more dangerous than Rosemary was really looking to sign up for. But so begins an adventure to the other side of the galaxy. I just feel like based on the writing that I've already read by this author, this is going to make me smile, it's going to make me laugh, it's going to make me cry. I just want something heartwarming and fun, and I love found family, and this is definitely, I feel like, going to be that. Next book that's on my TBR is The Story of a New Name by Elena Ferrante. I read My Brilliant Friend last year also when I was going to Italy, so I thought, let's read the sequel this year when I'm going to Italy again. I loved My Brilliant Friend. It was one of my favorite books that I read last year. It was very, very intense, which I feel like is in part why I haven't picked up this second book yet, because I know it's going to be like an emotional journey, if you know what I mean, but I also know that I feel like I'm going to love it immensely. This is the second book to the Neapolitan series by this author, which basically follows the lives of two women. In book one, you follow them as young children into their early adolescence and like very early young female adulthood. You see them as they grow close and compete against each other. They're both very, very smart, but you also see how their lives begin to diverge from one another as one is able to pursue education and the other is not. This book follows the same two girls, I think predominantly in their 20s. The series itself takes place post-World War II in Naples in Italy, and while the story is very intimately following our two female characters, it's very much also a reflection of the time and the history of this place too. Again, the first one was a knockout. The second one, I'm sure, is going to be a knockout. This also is one I feel like I'm going to be packing in my suitcase. I hope I get to it. Pressure me to get to this. The next book that's on my August TBR is for sure a carryover from my summer TBR that I just haven't gotten to yet, and that is Child of the Prophecy by Juliette Marillier. This is the third book to the Seven Waters series, which I have enjoyed immensely, at least the first two books. Juliette Marillier is fast become one of my favorite fantasy writers. Her lush and beautiful landscapes, her complex female leads, and also how she's able to infuse romance within her books too in such a thoughtful way. I've just really enjoyed, for the most part, all of the books I've picked up by this author, and in particular, I have loved the Seven Waters series so much. Each book is basically following a new female protagonist from the same family as they have to go out on a quest and adventure, as they basically have to fulfill their fate and destiny, and everything is very much interconnected. The first book, which is The Daughter of the Forest, introduces us to our first main character, who is the youngest child and only daughter to the Seven Waters clan. For most of her life, she had the opportunity to sort of run wild. She was educated, she loves healing herbs, and she loves to like spend time in the forest. However, though, at the beginning of book one, her father decides to remarry, and the new wife is basically like an evil sorceress and curses everyone in the family, and basically our main character has to set out on a quest and journey to try to save them without uttering a single word. I would say, honestly, each book in the series I've read so far, while very compelling and beautiful and unputdownable, are also rather dark, and there are quite a few trigger warnings, but they're also just so stunning. I'm really looking forward to see where the next book takes us in this prophecy that has been kind of expressed to us throughout the first 2 installments. I really find old school, more traditional fantasy like very nostalgic. I feel like Juliette Marillier really writes in that space. So I feel like this could be a really nice one to pick up this month too. The next book that's on my TBR is Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb. I need to finish this book. I am about 50% of the way through. I flew through the first half of this book at the very beginning of the month of July and then set it down because it was like a lot. I was processing a lot emotionally and I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to finish the second book in this trilogy yet. So I've set it to the side and procrastinated and just kind of looked at it longingly on the other side of the room for like a month. So now it's back on the TBR. We're going to finish it this month because I want to finish the third and final book this season, despite the fact that I'm really not ready for this to end. This, of course, is the second book to the final trilogy within the Robin Hobb universe. We're following Fitz and the Fool as they have to go out on a journey once again. This is a culmination of everything that I've read before, not only in the emotional payoff and pacing and stakes, but also the introduction of some new characters and the setting of everything. Divine. I am unwell reading this book. I am emotionally unwell, physically unwell, crying, sobbing, having a great time, having a terrible time at the same time. I'm gonna finish it though this month. The next book that's on my TBR just feels like a good, moody read that I've just heard really good things about, and that is Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. This is said to be a deeply atmospheric story about ancestral magic and also an unsolved murder set in a small town. Like, all of those plot components sound very interesting to me. And in the story, we follow our main character, Emery, whose life changed forever the day her best friend was murdered and the love of her life, August, was accused of killing her. Now, many, many years later, Emery finds herself doing the thing that she always swore that she was never going to do, and that is still live in the small town that she grew up in, which is also rooted in folklore and magic, and also work at her family's business, which is a tea and herbal shop. However, though, at the beginning of the story, Emery has a feeling that something is coming, and when she wakes up the next morning with every single tree in the town having turned seemingly overnight, she knows that she should expect the unexpected, and that's when August comes walking back into the town after leaving 14 years prior. With his arrival back into town in a place that he knows he is not welcome, everything in the town begins to shift once again as the memories and the occurrences of what happened 14 years prior also begins to shake like legacy and history from many generations prior. I'm really curious about this. I love atmospheric, small town, family-oriented stories. I feel like this is going to have a lot of drama and angst. It's not too long either, and I just feel like it could be one that I could easily read and get through too. Another more summery book that's on my TBR is Happy Place by Emily Henry. I feel like I have not read like any classic summer rom-com romance this summer, and I feel like I should try to squeeze one in before this season changes because I will not want to read this book when it begins to get cold outside. Emily Henry is an author I personally enjoy, and this is her newest release, and I believe it's a second chance romance. In it, we follow our two main characters that are kind of viewed as like salt and pepper, the perfect match within their friend group, but they, before the start of this novel, have very recently broken up and they have not told anyone in their friend group. However, though, they're all about to like venture to their cabin, which they always travel to, and spend a week kind of just enjoying each other's company and forgetting the outside world. And our two main characters decide to go to this friend retreat and just pretend that they're still together, not wanting to confront like the hurt and pain and the possible like disillusion of their friendship, given that they are now broken up. While they definitely hate each other, they also can't help but feel the spark that still exists between them. This sounds really complex and interesting. I'm not usually a second chance romance kind of girl, but I've heard such good things about this. I also love that it's set in Maine in a cabin. I mean, that just sounds like absolute summer goals if you ask me. Again, charming, I'm sure emotional, and just like a really fast read. I'm looking forward to reading this too. The book that's on my TBR is actually for my IRL book club. This was our book club pick, and I need to get it read before the very beginning of September, and that is The Guest by Emma Cline, another very new release in the literary fiction field. Emma Cline, our literary darling, if you will. The synopsis of this book is rather vague, but from what I can gather, it sounds like it's gonna be like propulsive and a little bit dark. We follow our main character who is not a socialite or like a part of the rich elite of New York City who all go to the Hamptons for the summer, but she's kind of like infiltrated their society a bit. But before the start of this novel, she has a bit of a misstep at a party, which kind of results in her like falling out with everyone. And from there, I believe the story takes place over a week where she moves from house to house to house to house, and like destruction is left in her wake. I'm curious about this. I love like a fake socialite-esque character. I feel like this could be like really tantalizing, if you know what I mean. And I mean, the back is also selling it very, very well too. Klein's writing is an addictive treat, irresistible, a thrilling new voice in American fiction, a striking achievement, assured work of a young writer, and a talent to burn. I mean, need they say more? I'm curious. The next book that's on my August TBR is Yumi and the Nightmare Painter by Brandon Sanderson. This is Brandon Sanderson's secret project number 3, so I just kind of want to have this on my radar and get to it as soon as I can. I love secret project number 1, which was Trust of the Emerald Sea. I thought the second secret project was just okay. I'm really curious to see where my thoughts and feelings will land with this particular installment. This is another non-Cosmere related novel. I think it's just a standalone fiction story by Brandon Sanderson. My vague understanding, because I'm trying to not look too much into this book, but it's basically about like 2 characters who have a connection between worlds. One character is a young man who stalks the streets at night, his only protection being a paintbrush and like his artistry skills, and the other is a young woman who will do like anything for her people. I don't know, I'm curious about this. This has stunning illustrations throughout it that really mimic painting, which I'm curious about. Like, I think the magic system sounds cool. All of the illustrations throughout all of these books have been honestly some of my favorite parts of reading this, so I'm just looking forward to this. I'm curious to see what I will think, what the plot is going to be about, and we will find out together. The next book that is on my TBR is He Who Drowned the World by Shelley Parker Chan. This, of course, is the sequel to She Who Became the Sun, which was one of my favorite books of the year when it came out a few years ago. She Who Became the Sun was such a fantastic combination of historical fiction and fantasy with such complex characters, not only exploring the historical realities of the time period, but also elements of identity and queerness as well. In this story, we follow our main character Chu, who at the very beginning of the story is the youngest daughter to a very poor farming family. Given that she's not only the youngest child, but also a girl, she's not really preparing to have much opportunity in her life, but when tragedy strikes her village, resulting in the passing of not only her family, but also her older brother, she decides to take on the identity of her older brother and basically go out into the world. From there, we follow her as she enters into a monastery, gets education, and also gets involved in rebellion and quickly moves up their ranks. This book is not straightforward. The story itself follows one of the most complex and dynamic main characters, their moral compass, their interests, their desires, both romantically and also their dreams for the world, is one that I could spend all day reading. We also have other POV characters as well, and identity and sexuality and perception are very much embedded within this book alongside an action-packed and riveting historical plotline too. I cannot wait to see where the sequel takes us next, because I feel like I'm gonna love it so much, so this had to be on my August TBR. The next book that I hope to maybe read this month is The Rise of Empire by Michael J. Sullivan, which is volume 2 of the Rhaenyra Revelations series. I read the first bind-up of the Rhaenyra Revelations last month and really enjoyed it. While it wasn't like mind-boggling 5-star read, there was something incredibly comforting about the narrative structure and like the story structure itself. Like the quests and storylines themselves were pretty predictable, but I just really enjoyed following our 2 main characters, Royce and Hadrian. Their dynamic was hilarious, and also just seeing how the world sort of evolved from the Legends of the First Empire series, just also something I also just really enjoyed reading. I also feel like with every installment, it's going to get better, so I'm hoping the plot will begin to progress and maybe take us to new heights and unexpected places. But even if it doesn't, there's something just really comforting about just the nature of this series itself. But to take a step back, the Rhaenyra Revelations follows our 2 main characters, Royce and Hadrian, who are 2 very notorious mercenaries for hire within this fantasy world. At the beginning of book 1, they're basically hired for a job which appears to be very easy, which is to steal a sword from the castle, but when they get there, they're basically framed for a crime they did not commit, forcing them to go out on a quest and journey with some unlikely companions who are also hilarious to basically like save themselves and possibly save the kingdom. I feel like the series really balances one sort of this quest of the week feeling. You're watching these characters as they have to go out and like solve and figure out these various problems, and every series sort of has that similar structure, but there is definite connection between not only the quests they're going on, but the political connection. So it's not like every storyline is contained, but it's like partially contained, if that makes sense. But beyond that, the real joy of the series is Royce and Hadrian's characters. Their dynamic is funny. As characters, they're just really endearing to read and follow, which is the part of this series that I have enjoyed the most. This book is really long. It doesn't look it. It's one of those books with those really thin pages. I think this is like almost 800 pages long, so I might not be able to complete the whole thing, but I think I could at least start the next installment, as this is a bind-up. And the last book that's on my August TBR is Wayward by Amelia Hart. This structure and story just sounds really interesting to me. The story centers the female experience in witchcraft through different time periods in history, but I also get the impression that all of these characters are interconnected and are connected through like fate and time. The first character we follow is in 2019, and her name is Kate, and she flees the busy streets of London to a cottage in the countryside that she inherited from her great aunt, trying to find refuge and peace and escape from her abusive partner. When she arrives at this cottage, she also begins to rummage around and basically discover and stumble upon a secret that seems to be tied to the witch trials themselves. We also follow Athla in 1619, who is accused of being a witch and is currently on trial after a local farmer was stampeded by his herd. She herself does know some magic taught to her by her mother. And lastly, we go to 1942 and follow a character named Violet, who is trapped in her family's crumbling estate. Craving the same robust education that her brothers received, she feels that she is straitjacketed by societal conventions, and she's also very curious to learn more about her mother's past, who is said to have gone mad before she ever had the chance to get to know her. I believe, again, all of these characters and storylines, while appearing unconnected, somehow weave together. Nevertheless, I'm really curious about this one. I love the idea of witchcraft through time, as well as this sort of shared experience too. I've heard really good things about this. I feel like it's going to be an interesting mix of fantasy, atmosphere, and literary fiction. Alrighty guys, that is my August TBR. Please let me know below some books you hope to get to this month, as I would love to know. Who knows, maybe I'll add them, because my TBR is already all over the place anyway. What's more books that I might possibly read this month? You know what I mean? But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye!